Andrew Urquhart with you on the eve of Anzac Day. And I know for a lot of people making the most of the long weekend, especially our second week of the school holidays, it kind of works strategically, doesn't it? But speaking of strategic, what about our relationship with our closest neighbours in Australia? When it comes to closer, not just economic, but political relations, and I'm not just talking about your cousins on the GC, how are we doing as a nation? Joining us on the program, political commentator Dr. Bryce Edwards. Bryce, kia ora, good morning, thanks for your time.
Maureen, Andrew.
Anzac coming up, and it is that time, I suppose, lest we forget, as well as thinking back to First and Second World Wars, remembering the soldiers, the sacrifice they made, all important stuff. But it's also that time of the year where I suppose we think about our Australian cousins a little bit more fondly and think, yeah, that was it. When we're in difficult circumstances, we've got each other's backs. Does that Anzac spirit apply to politics as well as Anzac Day, do you think? Have we got each other's backs politically?
Look, I think certainly the relationship at the governmental level between Australia and New Zealand is very strong at the moment. It's probably one of the strongest it's been for a long time. It gets strained from time to time. And even though we've got, I guess, a more centre-left government in power in Australia and a more centre-right one here, there's no doubt that those two prime ministers seem to get on. There's not a huge amount of disagreements. We'd been fighting, I think, a bit over things like 501s and some of the rights of New Zealand citizens in Australia. Some of those things have been ironed out. So, Anzac issues just keep on coming up all the time. There's the big one, which maybe we can talk about soon, in terms of defence relationships and this big question about whether New Zealand joins in with the one that Australia's got with the US and UK, AUKUS. But, the biggest relationship really at the moment, actually apart from trade, because we still actually import a huge amount of goods and services from Australia, and we export a lot. So they are one of our biggest trading partners. I think that they're maybe our second biggest trading partner after China. And of course, they're definitely our biggest in terms of the swapping of people, immigration. So, lots of us go over there, and it seems to be speeding up at the moment. A lot of people going to Sydney and Melbourne.
They're getting all of our nurses and police. We're getting all the 501s. I'm not sure that's a great deal. Bryce, perhaps we'll need to renegotiate that one. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the political parties, because, previously, of course, there was a Labour government on both sides of the Tasman. But from what you're saying, maybe Australia's centre-left is more closely aligned to New Zealand's centre-right. They're not exactly... would you go as far as to say that, or...?
I wouldn't. I do think that the Labour Party in Australia are quite different to the Labour Party here. In some ways, they're more left-wing. Some ways, they're more conservative. And likewise with the Liberal Party. So there are differences. They don't immediately correspond. And if you think back to another time that I think we had quite close relations under Helen Clark. And again, that was a Liberal government in Australia. But she got on really well with, I think it was Howard at the time. And so... I think people overestimate that there'll be differences if it's a left-wing government here and a right-wing government there, vice versa. Often it's more about personalities, but you're right that sometimes, a Labour government in Australia is actually more ideologically in line with the national government here, and that there is some sense of that at the moment.
Okay, now, of course, the central idea of Anzac and Anzac Day is the military connection that our countries have had previously. The broader geopolitical situation is vastly different than it was 100 years ago or even 60 years ago, but still an important question for us to look at. A small country at the bottom of the Pacific that can't really even afford a frigate or a decent air force, we need to form alliances that stick. From Anzac to AUKUS, an opportunity for New Zealand to play with the big boys, perhaps?
Yes, so for the last 110 years, New Zealand has had a very close defence relationship with Australia, training together, sharing technologies, doing lots of things together. It did get a bit more strained, especially after the 1980s and with nuclear free problems. It's got much closer in the last 10 years, and very close. But then, it's starting to be split apart again by this question of AUKUS. So just to remind listeners, this is this defence relationship between Australia, UK, and the US, initially about supplying Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. And now there's an idea of expanding that pact to something bigger. So they talk about Pillar 2 now, so maybe involving non-nuclear technologies and weapons, perhaps. And so, New Zealand is being invited to explore that. And the last Labour government did talk about their willingness to go into it, willingness to explore that. But the new government is much more gung-ho, I guess you'd say, much more interested in that relationship. And Winston Peters, is very pro-Australia, very pro the US, and wants us, so he's been off in the States recently in Washington talking to people there about how New Zealand might work in that relationship. But I don't know if New Zealanders are particularly ready for that. New Zealanders don't tend to take a huge interest in defence issues. And I've seen some opinion polling recently to show that there's not much appetite for spending more on military. New Zealanders seem happy with the relatively low levels of spending at the moment and wouldn't like to see that increased. But joining AUKUS would mean an increase in expenditure.
It certainly would. I mean, you can't play in that sandpit unless you're bringing your own toys, as it were. Which I had a flashback to that Mitre 10 ad, but there we go. With this situation, interested to get your thoughts on it, because as I say, the geopolitical situation has changed significantly.
It has.
And in Australia, England, the United States, those basically European or European descent colonial powers, like with like, we all speak English, sort of, we all joined together to fight against the axis of evil back in the day. But relationships have changed. Our Prime Minister's just got back from some very successful and significant conversations in Southeast Asia. As you say, Australia's our second largest trading partner. That's the silver medal. China, of course, getting the gold medal in that category. Depending on where we lean, which way we go, may shut down other relationships. It's a complex situation. Do those old alliances still make sense in your opinion, Bryce?
Yeah, look, you've brought up the elephant in the room, which is China, and a lot of the critics of AUKUS say that it's really all designed to try to contain China or to defend these countries against in a war with China or military escalation. And I do think that's largely true. And so if New Zealand was to join AUKUS in some form or another, that would be seen as extremely offensive to China. And China, I think, would retaliate in some ways. It would be a downgrading of our relationship. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And that's not necessarily a reason not to do it. But it's a pretty big reason if you're thinking about how much exports they take from New Zealand. It could have a big blow to New Zealand's standard of living. And of course, it could fuel the greater chances of military conflict in the Pacific. And so there's some critics of AUKUS that say, no, New Zealand's best to be an unaligned partner. Yes, we have some traditional alliances with Australia and the US, but we shouldn't, kind of do more in a way that would kind of build up, pressure the situation where we have our most influence on China as a trading partner and kind of a good friend. and we might play a better role in de-escalating conflict by being in that role. But I just would quickly point out that in terms of AUKUS, I mean, yes, it's the US, Australia, and UK, but those Western countries are actually trying to get in Japan and South Korea at the moment. So things have changed quite a lot. So Japan, yes, that used to be part of that axis of evil, if you want to call it that, or our enemy in previous wars, but certainly they are on the side, very strong on the side of the US and the UK and Australia, and that's where we're being lined up as well.
And certainly if we are considering AUKUS and the advantages to us as a nation, also, of course, got to count the cost of what that might mean for trade and relationships with some of the other countries in this particular part of the world. Bryce, thank you so much for your insight. As always, do hope that you have a fantastic Anzac Day, the rest of the school holidays with your family, but thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.